Hey, Aaron.
All right.
Doing pretty good. How
Tired.
about you? Yeah, me too. All right. So I just wanted to thank everybody for last week. You and I had to cancel last minute just because, our friends had the accident with their boys. So I just wanted to thank everyone for their well wishes and their thoughts and their prayers. They're doing much better. They've been released
Good.
back home and they're healing. So yeah. Um, so now that that's out of the way,
That's
I'm feeling
good.
much better
Yeah,
this
that was
week.
awful.
Yeah, it was so stressful. Those boys, we've known them for I think a little over 5 years. Our sons are best friends and they're over all the time, and our boys with them. So yeah, it just hit a little close to home. But thankfully everything is
Good.
turning out okay. So so that did kind of put a little damper into our uh, podcast. And we have been trying to get people to come on here and talk about their raw feeding journey, feeding balance over time. And a lot of people are like
hmm
you and me, they don't want
I'm
to go
having the
live.
hardest time. I mean, I had such an influx of people say that they do feed that way, that they would love to talk about it, but then they just disappear on me as soon as it comes down time to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I totally get it. I mean, I was like sick to my stomach the
Yeah.
first time that we did this, and I know that you were too. So, but thankfully, it is getting easier as we do this every week.
So
So hopefully we can
again,
get some
if
people
anybody would like to
that
join
would want to,
and talk about it, just casual. We're not gonna, interrogate anybody. We just want to talk.
yeah, yeah, because we both feel that like the balance over time feeding is kind
It
of
is,
like the silent
for sure it is.
majority. I feel
Yeah.
like there's a huge, yeah, I feel like there's a huge group of people that have been feeding this way for decades, and they just they don't want to speak up because in those, groups, people just bash everybody if they feed
I
differently
mean, I
than they
can't tell
do,
you how
and
many people have
it's
told
just, it
me
gets
that
destructive.
the raw feeding groups have really, really turned them off to even talking about the way that they feed because they've been, like you say, just bashed
Yeah.
and ridiculed and judged and told they're doing everything wrong. So I think that is a component
Yeah.
to why a lot of people are hesitant to talk about it. Although I know there's so many people that do. Like, as a matter of fact, I had a conversation with a woman this weekend, and she brought up a great point. She said, why is it that so many people are willing to accept feeding a food that says it's nutritionally balanced based on an AFCO feeding trial? But yet, that takes
Mm-hmm.
a 26-week trial, right? It's 26 weeks of 8 dogs. Only 6 of them have to complete the trial. And then the nutritional values, the blood values have to be within a certain range. But then in this
Mm-hmm.
community, there are a lot of people saying how, well, if you're feeding a nutritionally imbalanced diet, if you don't feed a complete imbalanced diet, that it could take years. So she said to me, and this was like such a light bulb moment. She said to me, why is it in AFCO feeding trials in 26 weeks, we know whether or not a food is going to provide nutrition or not. But when it comes to feeding real food, it could be years. She said, I've been feeding raw for 4.5 years and I'm still waiting to fall off the cliff. It's never happened. My dogs
Yeah.
are healthy. And I said, that's an excellent point. Like that's to the point that we're kind of trying to make,
Yeah.
I think. That was such a, I never really thought about it like that, but I thought that was such a great point to say, like, well, so 6 months, we can determine whether or not a food is nutritionally sufficient. But if we're feeding real food,
Mm-hmm.
it could take years to show up. Come on.
Years. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, the proof is in the pudding, Yeah. And just AFCO is
Yeah.
a mess anyways,
It's
because it's just
it's not
a group
meant
of
to
people
be
that,
translated into what we're talking about. It's just, and I think that
yeah,
comparison, people are getting hung
it's
up on that,
literally
though.
for
Very
feed.
hung up on that. Whether it be
Yeah.
AFCO or NRC or
Yeah. And
FEDF or what, whatever the nutritional standard is, getting hung up on those numbers and what it says on that piece of paper
yeah.
versus what am I putting? Am I putting all of what it's supposed to be in the bowl? I think it's just, there's so much. People are so scared of that. And I think there's so many people that just feed. They just feed meat and bones and organs, and they feed a variety of it, and they feed some fruits and veggies. They feed some supplemental foods. They feed real fresh foods and don't think about it and just do it. But they're not the ones that are out there preaching about it on social media.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. They're staying in their lane and doing their own thing. And yeah, I totally get that. I mean, I know for me, because at one point, I was wanting to get my foot in the door with raw food, and my state here in Oklahoma, in order to do that, you have to adhere to AFCO requirements. And so if I wanted to feed like a complete and balanced food, I could sell it like as an
Supplemental feeding, right? Is that what they,
a, yeah, a supplemental feeding. That's how it has to be labeled. And yeah, it's so overly regulated by people that I don't know. I don't think that they have the best interest at heart either. Because I've never been to a meeting, but I've seen people talk about the meetings that they go to, and so you have to pay for your own plane ticket to get there.
It's like $500 to go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have to pay to get into a meeting. And then it's almost like, kind of like a lot of conversations go with any kind of board. Like if they don't like your question, they kind of skip over it, like, well, we don't have time for that. Let's go on to the next one, type of thing. So they only talk about things that are pertinent to them. And when there are questions on something, they, kind of overlook it. So that whole thing is just a muddy mess, and I don't want to get involved in any of that. but so people, they should take the AFCO and all that just with a grain of salt. It doesn't.
I mean, and a dog
really
can
mean
eat.
anything.
A dog could be eating an AFCO approved food and develop a deficiency. It's not a guarantee that, I mean, that's why even if you're going to feed commercial food, whether it be kibble or raw or whatever, you should always feed a variety of food, because, it's different. Minerals are going to be absorbed differently. I mean, some of them use really poor quality absorbed substances to make it technically nutritionally complete,
Well, and the process, from what I have researched into, is almost anything can be approved as long as it doesn't kill the dog within a certain time
that's
frame.
Basically the gist of it.
I mean, you could put shoe leather.
I'm sure you've heard the boot thing, right? Where somebody literally used a leather boot. I mean, it could pass. Yeah. As long as you add the right synthetic vitamins and minerals, it's good to go.
Yeah. So that's just another reason to just dismiss all that and just feed, whole foods. I kind of wanted to talk about, I haven't been on social media much the last week, but there's one reoccurring theme that I keep seeing, and that is people want to start feeding raw, but even though like we give them the basics, you need to feed these bones and these, muscle meats and these organs, they still get overwhelmed because I don't know, they still don't know how much to feed and how often to feed. And so maybe we can talk about that a little bit. I know we've kind of covered it in the past, but I even have friends that came up to me and were like, I don't know what foods to start, feeding them. What can I do? And I was like, they have a big bull, a bull terrier. He's like 120 something pounds. And I was like, well, just start with like a chicken drum, still feed the kibble and then just try one chicken drum. And they were like, is that something he could choke on? And I was like, well, potentially he could choke on anything. I said, you just have to pay attention and, watch him as he eats it, and just be aware that he's not going to sit there and grind it down, like we chew our food. So they have zero molars. He's just going to crunch it enough, just enough to where he can
that's
swallow
a big
it.
scare factor for people, because they'll give them something even like a chicken foot, and they see him give it, one crunch and down the gullet it goes.
Yeah. I remember freaking out. Abel did that when I was first, like, he was a puppy. He was probably 4 months old, and I gave him the chicken foot, and he didn't even crunch it. He just swallowed it whole, and I was freaking out. I was like, oh my God, he's going to get a blockage. And I mean, I ran to the Facebook group, and, people kind of helped me get off the cliff there. But, he was fine. He was able to digest it, and he wasn't actively choking on it, and came right out.
Yeah, I mean, generally, if they get down, it stays down, and, it's good.
Yeah. So I guess for me, my biggest worry was, I think, probably like the bacteria issue. And then the bones were a big worry for me. And so I had a friend who was feeding raw that really helped me, like, encouraged me, be like, it's okay. He's like, your dog's meant to handle this. And so thankfully I had a friend to walk me through it. And honestly, I just had to jump in. I just had to jump in and get over my fear of doing it. And it felt really weird, at first, feeding this way, but then that became my new normal.
And I think most people's experience is really similar, where, they're very nervous to do it because it's different. It's very different. If you're feeding kibble, it's like just a whole nother, it just feels completely different, like a complete 180 from what you're used to doing. But 9 out of 10 people, I think, will tell you once they start, it just becomes second nature. You don't need to overthink all this, I mean, I think it gets confusing because there's so much information coming from so many different sources telling you different things. But if you just bring it back to the basics, like we're trying to educate on, it can be a very simple, easy, pleasurable experience for you, your dog. It doesn't have to be something to stress. I think people get stressed. They get really stressed about it. And it just doesn't need to be that way.
Yeah.
I get frustrated hearing people all the time telling me that they want to feed their dog this way. It looks great, sounds great, but they're just too scared to take that first step to doing it. So if we can maybe encourage like some ways, and that whole adding food, get used to adding fresh food to your dog's existing diet. It's just a great place to start. Someone told me over the weekend too in a consultation that, it was somebody saying to just buy a can of sardines and dump them on top of the food that got them started into feeding a full fresh diet. They started just doing that a couple times a week. They dumped a can of sardines on the food, and it can be so simple, something just as simple as that can get you in the, in the right direction to making a bigger change.
Yeah. I think like the biggest thing that you could, I guess not the biggest thing, but like the most beneficial thing you can do, which anybody can do this, it doesn't cost anything, is just hydrate the kibble. And I think that's the first step. And I know people saw that study that came out with Dr. Karen Becker and Rodney Habib, where it said, it caused bacteria growth in the puppies. But I think that whole, and I commented on it, and I think you commented on that post. I think that whole study was so flawed, and it was so misleading.
It was.
I was kind of disappointed. I was disappointed in that one. I feel like it was kind of released too soon before there was. Or they should have been.
I mean, the details of it weren't disclosed. Once you read, if you actually took the time to go and read the study, it was instantly like, well, it was a few dogs, a short period of time. It garbage science. I mean, that's just to prove that you can't always say, well, there's a study that proves this, because look at how the study's been carried out. There's a lot of really garbage studies out there that I would put And that's one of them I would put absolutely zero weight on. There's absolutely benefits to hydrating kibble. It's not, I mean, how long are they leaving water sitting on it? I mean, you add water to kibble. If you're going to hydrate it, that immediately, as soon as you put water there, that's why it's got to be removed to reduce bacterial growth. You're not going to let it sit there and marinate in the water until it's growing bacteria before your dog or your cat is going to eat it. So it's just, that's one of the most crucial things that's missing from kibble is that dogs and cats are meant to be consuming moisture primarily through what they eat. I mean, cats more so than dogs, but even dogs are still meant to be getting that intracellular moisture that's in meat as the primary moisture that they're getting in their diet. So kibble, I mean, automatically you're not getting that with that. So hydrating it is, like you said, it's probably number one on my list as well, as far as if you're going to do anything at all, hydrate it, you know?
And it could be with something as simple as just water, you know, filtered water. But in even moving past that, trying to get you more along the lines of like a supplement, like functional supplementing, which is a huge, like I love functional supplements that I know that they're going to be adding certain benefits. So even just rehydrate. Okay, so water is cheap. It's easy for everybody. Everybody has that. Then you can do, you know, bone broth, and then you can do raw milks. Those are probably the three that I would hydrate with, and those are all pretty cheap and everybody has access to. And I think once you get over the hurdle of like getting used to having a wet food that has whole food in it, then I think that, you know, you can take the next step. So once your pet is used to having a hydrated food, then you can start adding, I mean, anything that you have on hand, really. Like if you're making chicken for dinner and you have a little bit of, you know, scrap or extra chicken breast, I mean, just start cutting it up and just adding it on top of the kibble. You don't have to go like, I almost kind of relate it to people when they diet, you know, they cut everything out. And then, you know, they do okay for a couple of weeks and then they have a massive breakdown and they have a cheat day and they spiral out of control, just binging everything that they cut out. So people can take the same approach with this, is just instead of cutting one bad food out, like, so I'm not going to eat carbs today. Maybe people can start saying like, okay, I'm going to add a can of sardines. Like I'm just going to start with small whole fish. And then once they get used to that, then they'd be like, okay, well, now we can start adding, you know, some vegetables here and there. And I think if people just kind of take it slow and a little bit by a little bit, I think that's probably going to be easier than people just trying to like do the whole bone, you know, raw meaty bones, the organs.
I think a lot of people see the excitement that their pet gets when there's something besides just dry food in there, you know?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. 6, like I feed him outside and when I take his bowl out to the back door, he's like sprinting and he's sliding on the floor and he'll like slide my rug over. He's jumping, he's spinning around. Like it's insane. He would never do that with.
No, Dexter's the same way. He's the same way. He's very excited about his food.
Yeah. So you can definitely tell that they enjoy it as much as we do. But so, and this is another thing too, like why I was really inspired by Dr. Ian Billinghurst, because, or Ian Billinghurst, is that the way that he teaches, it's even like easier than anything that I have ever like come across, because he's like, whatever you have in the house, whatever you have on hand, whatever you're already making, just toss a little bit to your dog. Like it doesn't have to be a
Isn't
full
it silly
meal,
that we even have to be told that though?
You can, yeah, I know
Because I mean,
it really is. People get stuck around
you
meal
look
time
at these
and they have to have everything
dogs,
all
like that one that's popular right now, the current longest living dog. They talk to those people and they literally have just fed that dog the same things they're eating, like washed the seasoning off and given it to them.
Yeah.
So simple.
Yeah. It's so,
they eat real, I
So
mean, they seem
simple.
like
So
they,
simple.
from what I've read so far, eat a pretty local, fresh, healthy diet themselves. And they're just
Yeah.
sharing that with their
Mm-hmm.
dog. Not thinking about it, just
Yeah.
sharing them the same food that they're
Mm-hmm.
eating. Heavier on the meat, probably, but, you know,
Yeah.
sharing real food. And the dog's,
Yeah.
what, about to be 31 or just turned 31. I mean, that's a long, if there was something wrong, if there was something
It's a
wrong with
long
doing that,
time.
the dog would have been gone a long time ago.
I know. Yeah. You know, and then there's people that are going to be like, well, you know, I knew this
Yeah,
dog
well,
lived to be 25 on Old Roy.
I
And
know
I'm like,
people that smoked
okay.
and drank their whole lives and lived to be 95 years old. Okay, there's always going to
Right.
be the exception to the rule.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exceptions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And genetics play a huge,
Environment,
huge part in
you
that.
know, I mean, there's a
And yeah.
million
So,
factors, but the food, like to say that it's not okay to
yeah.
feed a dog anything, the whole scare tactic of saying you need to feed your dog this AFCO approved, complete and balanced, and all of this, or it's going to develop. That's,
Yeah.
we need to get over it because it's just not the case.
Yeah. So, how do you feel about puppies eating balance over time? Because, you know, they can't store certain vitamins that
It's
adult
not
dogs
so much that
can.
they don't
Um,
store any, it's that during growth, so when
I know.
tissues and bones are growing, they need, they have higher needs because they're trying to build more tissue and trying to grow more bone and
Grow.
trying to create new cells. Cells are replicating fast, so they need a higher demand of nutrients on the daily than a dog that's not doing that. Once they're stop growing, you don't need, the demand goes down when you're not growing. So it's not that they
Mm-hmm.
need something exactly perfect every single day. It's that they need a higher volume of those minerals, of those macronutrients that they need to develop better. Do I think it needs to be spreadsheet approved nutrition? No, because I didn't feed my own dog that way as a puppy. I didn't know to feed my own dog that way as a
Mm-hmm.
puppy. So I fed him what is technically going to be considered just a varied, balanced over time diet as a puppy. Because before, that was before I got into
Yeah.
formulating diets when I was feeding him. So that's how I fed him. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's how a large portion of people feed. I mean, when I first started feeding, I met a lady who was a Maine Coon cat breeder. And it was when I was super, super broke and trying to start feeding a cat who had kidney disease. And she was getting out of breeding and she had a bunch of meat that she was giving away. And so I met up with her to get food from her, and I wanted to talk to her because she's been a breeder for 20 some years, breeding these cats, feeding a raw diet.
Yeah.
And the first thing she said to me, because I started asking her what was in the mix, because she had this beef mix, and she said there's bone, there's meat, there's organs. And I said, it does it follow? At the time it was all about like the 80-10-10, 80-10-5. I said, is that what it follows?
Yeah.
And she said, what's that? She never heard of it. And she'd been breeding cats. So she'd never
Yeah.
even heard of that. She said, no, she goes, well, it might be roughly
Mm-hmm.
that, but we've never followed anything so specific in 20 some years of breeding cats. We don't follow anything like that. I said, do you give any kind of like supplement, like a vitamin or mineral supplement or anything? And she gave me this list of, you know, foods and like food supplements that she would give. But she said, no, in 20 some years of
Mm-hmm.
breeding cats, we've never been that specific. I didn't know there were people that did, because she wasn't on social media, so she didn't know the craziness.
Yeah.
And so she'd just been living her
Yeah.
life breeding cats for 20
Lucky
some
her.
years, feeding them fresh food. She said, no, she goes, well, we look at what maybe like a mouse or a rat is composed of. And, you know, we do. And she also did give her cats whole prey as well, chicks and mice.
Mm-hmm.
But she said, is the base of the diet, when we wean kittens, we give them raw milk and this, and that's it.
Yeah.
Healthy,
Mm-hmm.
healthy litters,
And they're
cats
healthy.
growing well, thriving. I mean, she was like, breeding them when the demands are the highest, and she wasn't worrying about that stuff. So at the time I walked away from it thinking she doesn't even know, like, but then I thought about it later, and I'm like, well, she didn't know even something that we're like bashing now, talking about feeding an 80-10-10 diet is so deficient, and so she didn't even know that. She never heard of it.
Right.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. It is nuts. Yeah. It is like when you think about how much we've kind of just keep spiraling. And I know that everybody's trying to do the best that they can, but yeah, it's spiraling out of control to where it's just keeping people from wanting to do it in the first place. And and again, like you said earlier in the podcast, bringing it back to basics. Like people have been early settlers have been feeding that way, including puppies.
Nobody even thought about that as a concept
forever
until kibble came out.
No.
No one thought about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the only way to keep, because I still see people that they still feed complete and balanced, and especially with puppies, that even from nutritionists, they still use the scare tactics of you have to feed your puppy. I don't know what else to do to try to convince people to stop listening to that. Like, just stop listening to the scare tactics. You're gonna be okay. Your pet's gonna be okay. Other than just like trying to just drill it into people's heads now.
I think people need to hear it more from people that do it.
Yeah.
So again, if we can get some people to speak up and just share that they've done that,
It's a talk. So let's ask the people that I guess are on here. Would any, I don't know, I guess, are people scared to do lives? Should we do something that's like pre-recorded, or maybe have like a form that people can submit to and then we can repost? I don't know. I'm up for anything at this point. Just so people, however people feel comfortable sharing their story, and we can get it
so
out
many
there.
Great stories through my email, through messages, but then they don't want to come on the live. So I feel like I want to share those.
So I mean,
how?
Yeah, and I'm okay with doing something pre-recorded. It doesn't necessarily have to be live. So guys, whoever's watching, if you guys have any opinions or ideas on how we can go about making people more comfortable talking about feeding this way, because I know so many of you guys do. Someone said pre-record or form. I often have a hard time.
That was the biggest thing.
Yeah,
when I asked for people, they couldn't make the time.
Yeah, and I understand. I mean, if I wasn't a self-employed person, I wouldn't be able to watch it either. Would love to share my experience reading Giant Breed Working Livestock Guardians. Yes, we would love to hear your experience. So Aaron and I guess we'll talk offline after this and figure something out, because I think the more that we can share these stories, the more comfortable people will start to get feeding, this way. It's what's natural. Does anybody have any questions on anything? I mean, we can talk about functional supplements and stuff, but we had planned to have a guest today talk about their experience, but it kind of fell through. Someone said, I would be open to sharing about switching my cats to raw after one of the two had a urinary tract blockage and hospitalized. I say that, but I feel super not knowledgeable. Hey, that's okay. I mean, I'm not an expert either. I've just been doing it for a while. Aaron, you're definitely way more educated on raw than I am, but and that that whole reason is why we got our cat switched to raw too, because he ended up having a urinary stone, and he had to stay the night too. So that was like a $2,000 ER, bill that could have been avoided had I just been feeding him what he should have been eating.
Common, very common.
Yeah, it is, and I didn't know that until
no, I don't.
after going through that experience. Okay. You're overwhelmed by the math problems and your lack of freezer storage. So, and that's the thing, like you shouldn't have to bust out a calculator to feed your pet. Like at all. I don't do any of that anymore. None. Yesterday I fed a turkey neck, I had beef chunks, I had venison, I had tripe. What else do we have? I had a fermented vegetable, I had an egg, I had yogurt with my supplements mixed in with it. I hadn't fed kelp in a while, or vitamin E. I don't think I fed any of that last week, so I added that to the bowl this week. I know that the kelp powder is really highly concentrated, so I know for me how much he should eat, which is just, one little tiny scoop of that. So I don't know, maybe we can have a session and talk about those kind of supplements and helping people not have to bust out a calculator in order to feed vitamin E, like how much
and
should
the
their
bone
dog
too,
or cat be
because the
getting.
bone seems to really confuse people.
Yeah.
But we're working on something to help with that, I think.
Yes. As soon as I kind of get caught back up from work and my house is a disaster, I plan to sit down and kind of help you on that. So Erin and I were trying to, we've made some infographics of like pie chart of kind of what your bowls should consist of. Like the bowl should be 60 to 70% of raw meaty bones plus muscle meat. And then, it should have a section of organ and a section of whatever. But for people, they don't know how many chicken wings my pet should start out with. Should they eat the whole pack, or should they just eat one? So I think these are things that we can kind of help encourage people with. But honestly, if they just continue to look at their dog's poop, they're gonna know what they need to do. Because if the poop is too runny, they're gonna need to either lower the organ content or increase the bone content. And if it's too hard and crumbly, that's typically too much bone. So back it off just a little bit. It really is kind of like a trial and error, because everybody's animal is different, and you have to just look at your dog and look at the poop and try to adjust accordingly. Yeah, but I think having those charts.
I think people just want something simple they can look at
for people.
Say, my dog is a small dog. What should I start? I think the small dog people and the cat people are the ones that get caught up in it because it's a little harder. Like we have dogs. We both have dogs that are large, and we can throw them pretty much anything and they can eat it. I think the small dog and the cat people are the ones that really struggle with that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Because now I make our cat the DIY raw, and so I'm about to order him some whole prey mice and little chicks. Because I was chopping up the quail, but I think if I can get him to eat like a smaller whole prey, that would be a whole lot better for him.
Ideal for cats. Ideal, obviously, makes sense. That's what they'd be hunting.
Yeah, and it's, we live out in the country, and we do get mice on occasion, and he won't like kill it and eat it. He'll just
a lot of
play
cats
with
are
it.
like that.
him and Six. Yeah. And so I don't know, maybe I can encourage him to like consume
like play with it for my cat to eat it, like make him think he killed it, or he wouldn't touch it.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. But that's the only thing that got him interested in it, is if he thought he did that, then he was willing to eat it afterwards. Otherwise, he wasn't. Has to be room temperature, can't be cold, and that's a typical thing with cats too. That can
Mhm.
get him interested. Like you got to get it
Yeah.
warm, or he won't touch it. He won't even consider touching it if it's cold or even
Yeah.
slightly cold at all. Like I do, like I soak them, put them in a bag, in one of those silicone
Mhm.
bags, and then soak that in hot water so it gets mouse
Yeah.
temperature again. When it's warm, cats are more
Yeah.
likely to eat things when they're warm. A lot of dogs don't really care.
That makes
Dogs,
sense.
I mean, throw them
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
frozen, they're still probably going to chew on it and eat it. But cats are a little more sensitive when it comes
Yeah.
to temperature, and they really do like their food to be warm.
That makes total sense. My cat typically eats. It's not like cold,
Yeah, they'll
but
definitely. I mean, my
it's
cat will
cool,
eat most
and he
things
doesn't
cold.
care.
Like, he doesn't want to wait. He's a cat. He thinks he's starving when it's time to eat. So, whatever you put down,
Yeah.
he's scarfing it up as fast as he can. Except for
Yes.
bone, I've noticed he doesn't like when it's cold. He'll only eat raw meaty bones if I soak them and they're warm. He'll only eat whole prey if it's warm.
Yeah.
But if it's just like a ground mix of something, he'll just house that down straight out of the freezer practically. He doesn't care about that.
Yeah.
But that's a little trick with cats. A lot of cats.
That's awesome.
A lot of cats won't eat any of it unless it's warm. So if they won't eat it and you haven't tried it warm it up in water. Don't
Yeah.
put it in the microwave or anything. Don't do anything like that.
Yeah. No. All right. I'm just going to go through some of these little comments. You guys are so encouraging, honestly. I can't wait to watch more of your lives. This has given me so much peace of mind. Ah, good. Thank you. I'm so glad that you're finding comfort in knowing that it doesn't have to be hard to do this at all.
Yeah.
Just jump in there and do it. What you're saying right now is valuable too. What to look for and how to make these random adjustments as needed based on their poop, for example. I'm only just starting to look at this, I don't know, moment maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I've been
awesome.
busy outside all week, so Dexter's just been getting large hunks of whole duck and rabbit and eating it while I'm outside working. That's been his diet for the whole week.
Yeah,
We raise ducks and rabbits, so we
that's
have whole
awesome.
duck and rabbit. That's all he's eaten all week is I chop up
Mhm.
a decent sized piece, throw it in the yard, and he works on it while I'm outside working. That's how it's been all
Yeah,
week because I haven't had time to meal prep. I haven't had time to do any of that stuff. He's just eating rabbit
yeah.
and duck, and he's eating what he wants of it. He'll eat as
What
much as
he
he
would get in
wants
the
of
wild.
it, which is usually the whole thing. So I try not to
Yeah.
give him a giant piece because he will sit there and eat a 10-pound rabbit if I let him, and just like he won't stop once he starts. So I chop it into like a reasonable about 2 pound size, or I will let my dog
Yeah.
also like gorge and fast. So if he eats a huge duck one day, I'll just fast him the next day, which is I think also scares people.
Yeah.
But it's
That
such a
does.
natural way for a dog to eat. I mean, that's how they would be eating if we weren't in the picture. They would hunt, they would catch something, they would eat as much as they wanted, then they'd lay there, digest. Maybe they don't catch something again for another day or two, I mean, that's just how it works. And it's really good for their digestive system. That's how it's actually, I mean, their stomachs stretch far more than ours do. I think it kind of scares people, but their stomachs are built to eat on that gorge and fast type schedule. And of course, if you're used to feeding kibble or whatever, you can't just jump into switching them like that. Their body's not used to it. But over time, when you're feeding, a raw diet, if you want to feed your dog in that model and your dog tolerates that, it's perfectly natural, fine way to feed. My dog eats that way frequently because it's easy and he does fine with it. He'll just eat and then he's good. I can wait a day. I might give him some goat milk the next day, a little bit or something, just so he has something. But he doesn't need another whole meal if he ate 2 days worth of food the day before.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And I know my husband is watching this. So, Matt, we may start raising duck and rabbit. So we can just,
Yeah,
toss it to the
it's
pets.
commonplace here. For me,
And
that's just like common.
yeah,
We raise them. I minimally process them for him, and then ducks, we pull some of the feather off. Rabbits, I pull a little bit of the fur just because my dog will pull some of it off on his own, and then just cut it and hand it.
yeah. Yeah, and I need that kind of simplicity in my life because my days are just like jam-packed from the moment I wake up and sometimes, and I do get in the bad habit of like putting off feeding the pets until it's like the last thing I do before bed, which I try not to feed on a schedule like that, but they just kind of get pushed down on my priority list, and then so by the time it's 10, I'm like, oh, the last thing I want to do is like make his meal. So,
and at that point, you're just pulling whatever's thawed out and handing it over anyway.
Yeah.
No, I do the same thing.
I really am. Yeah. And I am like running out of food in the freezer, and I'm just kind of like, okay, well, he's getting, this week. I know next week when I go grocery shopping or whatever, I need to, get more variety, but it's okay if he eats the same thing, a couple of days in a row, and he will be fine. All right, somebody asked a question. Do you guys have any recommendations on businesses that ship to the Northeast, whole prey, other animal parts? I feel like one thing I've struggled to find in Massachusetts is a reliable source. So, I know Raw Feeding Miami sells a ton of whole prey and grinds and anything that you can think of.
A lot of whole prey.
They're based out of Miami. Who?
My pet carnivore Hair Today does a lot of whole prey.
Yeah.
And they ship everywhere, I think. For a whole prey, you can go somewhere like Rodent Pro if you really want like bulk whole prey.
Yeah.
It's better price.
Mm-hmm.
They do chickens all the way from chick to large chicken. They do rabbits, guinea pigs.
Yeah. That's where I used to get mine. I used to freeze dry whole mice and guinea pig, and that's where I would source from. Because that's super hard finding somebody here on a smaller scale that raises them specifically, for feeding.
For 3 years, I bred
feeding to pets,
mice, rats, African soft fur, because my ferrets only ate whole prey, and it was so expensive to buy it. And then I was always grossed out by what they were feeding them. So I got into breeding rodents. We had a full rodent breeding room in our basement for a long time. I bred mice, rats, African soft furs. I bred like all these crazy rodents, and that was their entire diet. That's all they ate.
Wow, that's awesome. You're so handy. You're like me. Like I wish I could do like half of the stuff that you do, but
well, that's why I'm tired, because I'm redoing
the
whole because I made myself a huge project, and I'm redoing the whole chicken and duck and rabbit, all of it. I'm like redoing the whole thing. So every waking minute that I have spare, I'm spending doing it.
Yeah, I understand. We've been trying to build a coop now for probably 2 months or something. Just because like the weather has been crazy, it's been too cold, or we've got our 3 kids in soccer and one of them's on 4 teams, and it's just, plus I still hand make every product except for 2, so I'm still like slaving away making products and packaging orders and shipping them out, and then it's just I'm with you. I'm tired, but I love it though.
No, I
wouldn't change.
I'll never go back.
Yeah. So I guess if you're having problems in Massachusetts finding whole prey, those online shops that Erin and I just said, those are they ship nationwide, and I guess maybe try to find a local farmer. I don't
I
know how
don't know.
many farms are up in
You can look,
Massachusetts,
if you
but
look
I'm
on
sure
like
there's
local
somebody out there.
classifieds, you can probably find somebody who breeds rodents small scale near you. You could probably get a better price because you're not going to pay shipping. Because there's always people that are breeding them for snake owners, and you know, I mean, because if you have a reptile or a snake or something, you don't have a choice. You have to feed them that. So
yeah. Or the other option is raise them yourself if you
get a lot of
able
mice
to.
really quick.
Let's see.
I learned that in school.
Yeah.
I was like, I thought we needed like all these breeding pairs. I'm like, they eat a lot because ferrets eat a lot. Like compared to cats and dogs, they eat more like 10% of their body weight daily, minimally. And then I had one that ate closer to 20% of his body weight daily. So that was a lot of mice. So I was like, we're going to need all these tons of mice. And I set up this huge thing. And then all of a sudden I realized we had like hundreds of mice in no time. I was like, all right, well, we can scale back a little.
Yeah. They will repopulate for sure. Okay. So if someone like this person is stuck in an area where they can only feed maybe like 3 different proteins, I guess what are some options they can do to keep it budget friendly, but try to add more variety? Do you think, I don't know, because shopping online is not cheap. It's not cheap at all. You're mostly going to be paying for the shipping, and that's not the company trying to rip anybody off. I promise. Shipping is, especially in today's day and age, it's insane. Especially to ship frozen items all the way across the country. So you're going to be paying anywhere from like $50 to $100 in shipping, depending on where you're getting it shipped to. Excuse me, and how much you order. So I guess I would just try to feed, like if you can only get 3 different proteins, try to get different organs from the same protein, different body parts from the same proteins.
I mean,
I don't
shop
know.
around and see. I mean, I feel like every time I have this conversation with somebody, they find out that there's something more than what they thought they had available. As far as like maybe there's a little market or some ethnic market or something that has something maybe they couldn't find. Shop sales, you know, learn what days, if you're on a budget, learn what days the grocery store is near you, mark things down that are getting close coded and go with that. There's just so many ways that you can save a little money. I mean, if you can't if you can't find a good variety of organs, invest. Maybe it doesn't cost a lot to get a freeze-dried organ blend that you could even add in that has all the glands, all the organs. I think they're one of the most valuable things for people, especially that can't get a lot of variety and don't want to pay. It's still going to cost you a lot less than it will to have all of that stuff shipped to you. To just get something like that you can add, and that's like a natural multivitamin to have all of the glands and all of the organs in a concentrate that you can just add a scoop on top of the, you know, the basic. If you can just get turkey and beef and pork or whatever in the store, if you're going to add something like that, you're adding a tremendous value to what you can source locally. In my opinion, it's probably the most beneficial thing that somebody like that could add.
Yeah, that's great. I think we should, as humans, consume those too.
And I make my kids take.
We don't eat those.
The liver vitamins and all. Yeah, they have since they were like 5 years old.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, and when I was trying to like source all these items because I was making treats and stuff, I really wanted to support my local farmers and my community. So I literally took like 1 or 2 full days and I drove all around the city, just going into, you know, parts that I wasn't quite familiar with, just trying to find certain grocery stores or different butchers or anything. And I would go into them and see what they had. And I found
Yeah.
so much variety. I found so many shops that I never knew were there. And so that's what I would suggest. Like if you have a little time to kill, just
If you have
drive
a
around and
farmer's
see what
market
you
or
can
something in
find.
your area too, to go there and ask if there's people there that sell meat. I did that years ago
Mm-hmm.
and just asked. There's a person that sets up at our local farmer's market that does goat, but they weren't selling the liver, the kidneys, or the hearts, or the tongues, or any of that. But they had access, and as soon as I asked, the next week they showed up with all of that stuff at a really good price, just because nobody had ever asked for it before.
Yeah. Yeah. And even like the butchers and stuff, they would rather those,
Yeah,
off parts
yeah.
be used than just dumped. So, again, that kind of just depends on your state and the county, because some areas they won't let them even
That's why
give
you got to
away
go to the
those items. So,
individuals
but it
that
never hurts to
raise
ask.
animals, or get. I asked in hunting groups
Yeah.
and farming groups and homesteading groups,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people, even individuals that will raise, on a smaller scale animals. I mean, when I got into
Mm-hmm.
rabbit breeding, I met other people that bred rabbits, but they weren't using the rabbit heads, they were composting them, because they weren't eating them and they didn't have
Yeah.
dogs to feed them to. So they thought that was waste.
Right.
But look at what you'll pay to get a
Mm-hmm.
pack of rabbit heads shipped to you.
Rabbit.
And these people couldn't believe
Yeah.
that that's something
Yeah.
that somebody would pay for, let alone want. Just, sometimes you get talking to people like that and you can make a good connection for some. I mean, before I bred my own rabbits, I had
Yeah.
a local rabbit breeder. When you breed rabbits, unfortunately, you lose kits frequently. They have
You
large
do.
litters
I know.
and not all of them make it. And they started saving them for me. And at the end of the month, they would have a huge bag of kits that I could feed my dog, my cat,
Mm-hmm.
my ferret. And they just gave them to me because they felt
Yep.
like they were glad that somebody could actually use those lives.
Yeah. I experienced the same thing with there was a local rabbitry that I was getting the rabbits from that I used for my treats. And like you said, they would lose kits all the time, and they would just
Mm-hmm.
freeze them for me until they had a big enough bag. And so, it's not something that I had on a regular basis, because obviously
Yeah.
I don't want them to cull them specifically for that.
But it's one of
So
those things
it was
you
just kind of
learn.
like
Like you
hey,
learn
when I
that,
have
or
these,
I learned that when I started breeding all of these things. Loss is a part of it. You can give them the
yeah,
best, but
yeah,
loss is a part of it. And at least I know I can utilize the loss with my animals. And a lot of the people,
yeah,
like, so if
yeah.
somebody doesn't
And
want to get
most
into it
people love doing that.
themselves, connect with the people that do, because in my experience, 90% of them are going to feel the same way, that, they would rather see it go to use than be digging a hole in their backyard to compost it.
Yeah. Good ideas. All right. We are coming up on 1 p.m. All right. I guess we'll probably wrap it up. Um, you and I, we will continue to, oh, you guys, you're so welcome. We're so happy to give you any kind of information that we can and make this easier on everybody. We will continue to work on the bone charts for each weight and which pieces to give and to start with for you guys. So that's a work in progress. But our main thing is we can sit here and we can, talk about things over and over and over. But we really wanted to start this podcast to talk to the silent majority that's out there. And so if you guys have been feeding this way for years and years, we want to know your experience. We want to listen. We want to share it with other people, because the more people realize that this is easy to do, the more people will get on board with it. So if we have to go to like a pre-recorded thing,
Yeah.
I'm down with that. I think you are too, Erin. And or we might, have a form where you can submit on both of our websites, and then we can,
figure out a way
I don't
to
know,
share
figure out
that.
how to share that mutually. Yeah, we'll figure it out. But so if you guys have your own experience and want to share it, or if you know of people that have been feeding this way forever, please reach out to them. Know that we want to hear it and we want to share their story. So I guess until next time, everybody have a good week. Erin, it was a good
Thank you.
conversation. Thank you. We will upload this to our YouTube channel, The Raw Truth, just like always, so you guys can watch it later. Excuse me. Please like and subscribe it. It helps us get this podcast out to more pet parents, so we can start changing the lives of more pets. So until then, I guess we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
All right. Have a good week, everybody.